He stood in court, accused and defeated, until a child's voice shattered the silence. "Stop! He's lying!" cried 10-year-old Caleb, holding up a toy camera no one had taken seriously. For a moment, Pastor Leonard believed his life was over. But what that camera revealed changed everything. In a town built on trust, one man's envy almost destroyed it all. But could a boy's simple act of faith restore what was lost? Want to know what happened? Watch until the end and don't miss this story full of emotion and unexpected twists. Also, tell us which city you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. The town of Maplewood was the kind of place that seemed frozen in better times. White picket fences lined streets named after trees, and neighbors still brought casseroles when someone fell ill. At the heart of this close-knit community stood a modest white church, its steeple visible from every corner of town, a beacon of hope and stability for as long as anyone could remember. Pastor Leonard Miller had served this congregation for over 40 years. At 77, his once robust frame had grown slighter, but his kind blue eyes still sparkled with the same warmth that had comforted generations of townsfolk. Leonard was the person everyone turned to in times of trouble, the steady hand at hospital bedsides, the wise voice at community meetings, and the first to arrive with support when tragedy struck. 4 years ago, Leonard's life had taken an unexpected turn when he became the guardian of a small boy named Caleb. The child had been abandoned at a highway rest stop just outside town, clutching nothing but a tattered backpack and a plastic toy camera. When authorities couldn't locate any relatives, Leonard, who had lost his wife a decade earlier, opened his heart and home to the traumatized 6-year-old. "Sometimes God's greatest blessings arrive in surprising packages," Leonard often said. When asked about his late-in-life foray into parenthood, the bond between the elderly pastor and the quiet child grew strong. Caleb, now 10, rarely went anywhere without his plastic camera, documenting the world around him even though the toy couldn't actually store images. Leonard had offered to buy him a real camera many times, but Caleb refused. That plastic toy was his last connection to his previous life. Change came to Maplewood in the form of Pastor Jonathan Hart, a charismatic 40-year-old sent by the diocese to assist the aging Leonard. With his polished sermons and modern ideas, Jonathan quickly captivated many in the congregation. He spoke of expanding outreach programs, upgrading the church's technology, and bringing in younger families. All things Maplewood needed. "It's time we brought this church into the 21st century, Jonathan would say, with his camera-ready smile. Most found his enthusiasm infectious. Leonard welcomed the help, especially with the church's charity account that provided emergency assistance to struggling families in the community, but Caleb wasn't so easily won over. The boy watched Jonathan with wary eyes, especially when the younger pastor spoke to Leonard with what seemed like barely disguised condescension. "I don't like how he looks at you," Caleb told his grandfather one evening as they sat on their porch swing, "like he's waiting for something." Leonard chuckled and patted the boy's knee. "Sometimes people are just eager to make their mark, son. Doesn't mean they wish harm." Neither could have imagined how those innocent words would echo back to them in the difficult days ahead. Days that would test the very fabric of trust in Maplewood and reveal how quickly good people could turn on one of their own. The church's charity account had always been Leonard's pride, a testament to Maplewood's generous spirit. Every Sunday, parishioners contributed what they could, knowing their dollars would help neighbors facing medical bills, unexpected job losses, or other hardships. The fund had saved countless families from despair over the decades. When Jonathan suggested modernizing the accounting system, most church council members nodded their approval. Only Harriet Simmons, who had been church treasurer for 30 years, voiced hesitation. "Our current system has safeguards built in," she explained during a council meeting. "Changes need authorization from 2 people, and everything is documented." In triplicate, Jonathan smiled patiently. Harriet, that's precisely the problem. All that paperwork is inefficient. We're wasting valuable time that could be spent helping more people. 2 months later, Harriet retired after a mysterious falling out with Jonathan. The younger pastor quickly stepped in to oversee the finances himself, assuring everyone this was temporary while they searched for a replacement. Leonard felt a twinge of unease, but pushed it aside. After all, Jonathan had credentials from the finest divinity schools and came with glowing recommendations. Besides, Leonard had his hands full with Caleb, who was struggling in school. The boy had recently started therapy to address lingering trauma from his abandonment. Then came the Wednesday that changed everything. Leonard was tending to the church garden when Jonathan burst through the doors, his face ashen. "Leonard, we need to talk immediately," he said, guiding the older man inside. "I've discovered serious irregularities in the charity account. $20,000 is missing." The elderly pastor felt his knees weaken. "That's impossible. How could that much disappear without notice?" "I've been reviewing the records," Jonathan said, producing a folder of papers. "There have been numerous withdrawals late at night over the past few months. I checked the security logs. Your code was used to access the safe each time." Leonard's mouth went dry. "But I don't want to believe it either," Jonathan interrupted, his voice dropping to a compassionate whisper. "But the evidence is overwhelming. Leonard, did you take that money?" "Absolutely not." Leonard felt his face flush with indignation. "Then you won't mind if I present these findings to the church council," Jonathan said, "for transparency's sake." Before Leonard could fully process what was happening, news of the missing money spread through Maplewood like wildfire. By evening, Jonathan had called an emergency meeting where he solemnly presented bank statements, withdrawal receipts, and security logs, all seemingly pointing to Leonard's guilt. The church council members exchanged uncomfortable glances as Jonathan laid out his evidence. Martha Green, who had taught Sunday school with Leonard for decades, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Bill Peterson, whose mortgage Leonard had helped pay after Bill's heart attack, stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's gaze. "I take no pleasure in this," Jonathan said, his voice heavy with regret. "But as stewards of this community's trust, we cannot ignore such a serious breach." Leonard sat silent. Bewilderment etched across his weathered face. The accusations felt like a terrible dream, one from which he couldn't awaken. Each piece of evidence seemed more damning than the last. His security code used repeatedly, withdrawals on nights he admitted to working late at the church, and even his signature on several withdrawal forms. "I never signed these," Leonard finally said, his voice barely above a whisper as he examined the papers. "Someone has forged my signature." Jonathan sighed sympathetically. "Leonard, denying it only makes this harder for everyone. Perhaps there were expenses in raising Caleb, or medical bills you've kept private. The congregation would understand extenuating circumstances." "I would never take money meant for those in need," Leonard insisted, his hands trembling. "Not for any reason." The council voted to suspend Leonard from his duties pending further investigation. They also agreed, at Jonathan's suggestion, to involve the local authorities. Within days, the story transformed from church matter to public scandal. Townspeople who had known Leonard their entire lives suddenly viewed him through a lens of suspicion. At the grocery store, conversations halted when he walked down an aisle. Parents gently guided their children to the opposite side of the street when they saw him coming. For Caleb, the change in their lives was devastating. Classmates whispered when he entered the room. His best friend's mother cancelled a long-planned sleepover with a flimsy excuse. The boy who had already lost so much now watched as his secure world crumbled again. "Why are they doing this to you?" Caleb asked one night, curled against Leonard's side on their old sofa. "Don't they know you're good?" Leonard pulled the boy closer. "People get scared when money is involved, son, and scared people sometimes believe things they shouldn't. But you didn't do it," Caleb said fiercely. "No, I didn't." Leonard stroked the boy's hair. "The truth will come out eventually. We just need to be patient. But patience was in short supply when, the following day, the district attorney announced formal charges against Leonard. A preliminary hearing was scheduled at the county courthouse for the following week. That evening, as Leonard sat alone in prayer, Caleb slipped outside with his plastic camera, a determined expression on his small face. Caleb had always been a watchful child. Years of uncertainty had taught him to observe carefully, to notice things others missed. While adults dismissed his plastic camera as a childish comfort object, the toy had recently been upgraded with a real digital camera his school counselor had helped him install, a therapeutic tool to help him process his feelings through photography. Not even Leonard knew about this modification. The counselor had shown Caleb how to transfer images and videos to her computer during their weekly sessions, but the boy had quickly learned to download them to the public library computers. As well, the day after Leonard was charged, Caleb slipped into the church early. He knew Jonathan would be there, preparing for a special prayer service he'd organized to heal the community's wounds. Finding a hidden spot behind the organ, Caleb waited, camera clutched in his small hands. An hour passed before Jonathan entered, looking over his shoulder before approaching the office. Caleb held his breath and pressed record, the camera's tiny lens capturing Jonathan as he unlocked the safe using a key, not the security code. The younger pastor removed an envelope, counted several bills, and tucked them into his wallet. Just a few more days, Jonathan murmured to himself, unaware of being recorded. Once the hearing confirms the evidence, no one will question me taking over permanently. Caleb's heart pounded so loudly he feared Jonathan might hear it. When the pastor finally left, the boy rushed home, desperate to show Leonard what he'd witnessed. "Grandpa, look, I have proof," he exclaimed, bursting into the kitchen where Leonard sat with untouched coffee. But when they reviewed the footage, Leonard's face fell. The video was dark, the angle awkward. While they could make out Jonathan at the safe, the crucial details, the key, the money, the self-incriminating whispers, were barely discernible. "This isn't clear enough, Caleb," Leonard said gently, "and no one would believe you secretly recorded this anyway. They'd say I put you up to it." "But it's the truth," Caleb protested. "Sometimes the truth needs perfect conditions to be believed," Leonard replied, his voice weary. "And right now, too many people have already decided what they think happened." Undeterred, Caleb returned to the church each day that week, hoping for better evidence. His persistence was rewarded on Friday afternoon, when he recorded Jonathan meeting with someone in the empty sanctuary, a bank officer discussing how to transfer the charity fund to a new account under Jonathan's sole control once the legal issues with Pastor Leonard are resolved. This time, the lighting was perfect, the audio crystal clear. Caleb knew he had exactly what they needed, with the hearing just 3 days away. What he didn't know was that Jonathan had spotted movement behind a pew as he was leaving and was now determined to find out who might be watching him. Sunday service was unusually tense. Jonathan preached about difficult truths and painful growth, his sympathetic gaze repeatedly falling on Leonard, who sat in the back pew beside Caleb. Most congregants avoided looking at the elderly pastor, their discomfort palpable in stiff shoulders and averted eyes. After the service, Caleb headed to his usual Sunday school classroom while Leonard spoke with his attorney in the garden. Neither noticed Jonathan watching the boy with newfound suspicion. "Caleb, could you help me in the supply closet?" Jonathan called, his voice honey-sweet. "I need to reach some papers on the top shelf." Inside the closet, Jonathan's demeanor changed. Instantly, "I saw you hiding in the church Friday," he said, blocking the exit. "What were you doing there?" "Nothing." Caleb clutched his camera tighter. Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "That toy camera. It's not really just a toy, is it?" He reached for it. "Let me see." "No!" Caleb backed away. "It's mine. Give it here, or things will get much worse for your grandfather." Jonathan's voice dropped to a menacing whisper. "I can make sure he goes to prison, you know." "Then where would you go? Back into foster care?" Terrified, Caleb ducked under Jonathan's arm and bolted from the closet. He ran straight to Leonard, breathlessly explaining what happened. The elderly pastor's face paled. "We need to keep that camera safe," Leonard said, "and you need to stay away from Jonathan." That evening, a knock at their door revealed Detective Harris, who had been assigned to Leonard's case. "Pastor Miller, we've received a complaint," he said grimly. "Jonathan Hart alleges you've been using your grandson to harass him, having the boy spy and possibly tamper with church records." "That's ridiculous," Leonard protested. Detective Harris sighed. "Normally, I'd agree, but given the financial evidence against you, well, it establishes a pattern of moral flexibility." After the detective left, Leonard and Caleb sat at their kitchen table, the weight of injustice heavy between them. "He's trying to discredit me before I can show anyone the videos," Caleb said, fighting tears. Leonard nodded slowly. "We need to be careful about who we trust with this. Many minds are already made up." They decided to approach Judge Elaine Freeman directly. Having served on the bench for 30 years, she was known for her strict fairness. If anyone would give them an unbiased hearing, it would be her. The next morning, Leonard called the courthouse to request a private meeting with the judge before the hearing. To his relief, Judge Freeman agreed to see them that afternoon. But as they prepared to leave for the courthouse, they spotted Jonathan's car parking across the street. He had been watching their house and now moved quickly toward their door with Detective Harris beside him. "He's coming for the camera," Leonard realized aloud. "Caleb, run out the back door. Go to Mrs. Wilson next door. I'll handle them." Clutching his precious evidence, Caleb slipped out just as heavy knocking rattled their front door. Mrs. Wilson, a retired school teacher who had known Leonard for decades, didn't ask questions when Caleb appeared breathless on her doorstep. She simply ushered him inside, away from her front windows. "Your grandfather called me this morning," she whispered, pulling curtains closed. "Said you might need a safe place. That camera has something important on it, doesn't it?" Caleb nodded, still catching his breath. Through Mrs. Wilson's kitchen window, they watched Detective Harris and Jonathan enter Leonard's house. 15 minutes later, they emerged, looking frustrated. The detective headed to his car while Jonathan lingered, scanning the neighboring properties with narrowed eyes. "He's looking for me," Caleb whispered. Mrs. Wilson's wrinkled hand squeezed his shoulder. "Well, he won't find you. Come downstairs. My late husband's workshop has a back exit that leads to the alley." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m. At 1:30, Mrs. Wilson drove Caleb to the courthouse through back streets, avoiding main roads where they might be spotted. Leonard had already been transported there by his attorney. "Remember," Mrs. Wilson said as they parked, "go straight to Judge Freeman's chambers. Her clerk is expecting you." Inside the imposing brick building, Caleb clutched his camera and followed the directions Mrs. Wilson had given him. He was nearly at the judge's office when a familiar voice called his name. "Caleb! There you are!" Jonathan emerged from around a corner, his smile tight. "Everyone's been worried about you." The boy froze, his small body trembling. "Your grandfather is quite upset," Jonathan continued, approaching slowly. "Let me take you to him." "I don't believe you," Caleb said, backing away. Jonathan's friendly facade slipped momentarily. "That camera has caused enough trouble. Give it to me, and all this can end. Your grandfather might even avoid jail time. Is there a problem here?" A court bailiff appeared, eyeing the situation. "No problem," Jonathan recovered quickly. "Just trying to help this lost child find his guardian." "I'm not lost," Caleb declared. "I have an appointment with Judge Freeman. It's urgent." The bailiff studied the boy's determined face, then Jonathan's carefully composed expression. "I'll escort him to the judge's chambers myself," he decided. Jonathan could only watch helplessly as Caleb was led away. In the judge's private office, Caleb finally felt safe enough to reveal everything. He connected his camera to the judge's computer and played both videos. Judge Freeman watched in silence, her experienced eyes missing nothing. "This is very serious evidence," she said when the footage ended. "If authentic, it completely contradicts the case against your grandfather." "It's real," Caleb insisted. "I didn't edit anything." Judge Freeman nodded thoughtfully. "The hearing begins in 10 minutes. I think we'll have a surprise for Pastor Jonathan Hart." Outside in the courtroom, Leonard sat alone at the defendant's table. his shoulders bent with worry. He had no idea if Caleb had made it safely to the judge or if their last hope had been intercepted. The courtroom filled quickly with Maplewood residents. Some came out of concern for Leonard, others from morbid curiosity about a man they thought they knew. Jonathan sat confidently behind the prosecutor, occasionally leaning forward to whisper suggestions. Judge Freeman entered, and the proceedings began with the prosecutor outlining the case against Leonard, the missing funds, the security logs, the signatures. Throughout this recitation, the elderly pastor kept his eyes forward, his expression one of dignified resignation. "Your Honor," the prosecutor concluded, "we have documented evidence of $20,000 missing from accounts that only Pastor Miller had full access to. The signatures on withdrawal forms match his handwriting according to preliminary analysis." Leonard's attorney rose to speak, but Judge Freeman raised her hand. "Before we continue, there's a witness who has requested to present evidence directly relevant to this case," she announced. "The court will now view this evidence." Jonathan shifted uneasily in his seat as a bailiff wheeled in a television monitor. Leonard straightened, hope flickering across his face for the first time in days. The bailiff connected Caleb's camera to the monitor. The courtroom fell silent as the first video played, showing Jonathan opening the safe with a key, counting money, and muttering about taking over permanently. The second video was even more damning. Jonathan's explicit conversation with the bank officer about transferring funds once Leonard was out of the way. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Jonathan leapt to his feet. "This is clearly manipulated footage," he protested, "created by a child with a vendetta, obviously coached by the defendant." "The footage has already been authenticated by our court's technical expert," Judge Freeman replied calmly, "and I believe the person who recorded it should explain how these videos came to exist." At her nod, the side door opened, and Caleb entered, clutching his camera. He walked straight to the witness stand, his small tennis shoes barely making a sound on the polished floor. "Please tell the court your name and relationship to the defendant," Judge Freeman instructed gently. "Caleb Miller. Pastor Leonard is my grandfather. He adopted me when no one else wanted me. And can you explain how you captured these videos?" Caleb described how he'd become suspicious of Jonathan, how his school counselor had helped upgrade his toy camera, and how he'd hidden in the church to record what was really happening. "I knew Grandpa would never steal," Caleb said, his voice gaining strength. "He teaches me every day about honesty." Jonathan's face had drained of color. As Caleb spoke, the younger pastor began edging toward the exit, only to find his path blocked by two deputies who had quietly positioned themselves by the doors. "In light of this evidence," Judge Freeman declared, "all charges against Pastor Leonard Miller are dismissed. Furthermore, I am ordering the immediate arrest of Jonathan Hart on charges of theft, fraud, and evidence tampering." The courtroom erupted in chaos. As deputies handcuffed Jonathan, Leonard made his way to Caleb, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. Leonard gathered Caleb in his arms, holding him close as the courtroom buzzer sounded around them. Time seemed suspended in that embrace. An elderly man vindicated and a boy who never lost faith. "You saved me," Leonard whispered against Caleb's hair. The boy smiled up at him. "You saved me first, remember?" As they turned to leave, they faced a sea of familiar faces wearing expressions of shame and regret. Martha Green approached first, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "Leonard, can you ever forgive us for doubting you?" she asked, voice trembling. Others followed with similar pleas, people who had known Leonard for decades, yet had been so quick to believe the worst. The elderly pastor nodded to each one, accepting their apologies with quiet grace. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered, eager for statements about the dramatic reversal. Leonard declined interviews, saying only, "Truth has a way of coming to light, especially through the eyes of children." In the weeks that followed, Jonathan's scheme unraveled completely. Investigators discovered he had orchestrated similar frauds at two previous churches, always targeting respected older pastors whose reputations he could undermine. The money, all $20,000, was recovered from a hidden account and returned to the charity fund. The church council formally apologized to Leonard and begged him to resume his pastoral duties. He agreed, but with one condition: the appointment of a diverse financial oversight committee that would ensure no single person could ever again control church funds without accountability. Caleb's toy camera found a place of honor in the church display case, alongside a plaque commemorating how a child's faith had saved an innocent man. The boy himself received a real camera from the congregation, a professional model that he used to document church events and community gatherings. The Sunday Leonard returned to the pulpit, the church overflowed with people. Some came to hear what wisdom he might offer after such a betrayal. Others came hoping for forgiveness. Leonard looked out at them all with the same kindness he had always shown. "We are reminded today," he began, "that appearances can deceive. A man with credentials and charm nearly destroyed what we've built together over generations. But we were also shown that sometimes truth comes from unexpected sources, like a child with a plastic camera." Leonard extended his hand toward Caleb, who joined him at the pulpit. "I hold no bitterness," the pastor continued. "Instead, I'm grateful for this lesson, that we must balance trust with wisdom, faith with vigilance, and most importantly, we must listen to those whose voices are often overlooked." That evening, Leonard and Caleb sat on their porch swing, watching fireflies rise from the twilight grass. Neither needed many words. Their bond had been forged in fire and emerged stronger than before. "Do you think people will remember what happened?" Caleb asked eventually. Leonard looked at the boy who had saved him, not just from false accusations, but from loneliness years before. "They'll remember," he said softly, "and so will we. That's how we grow wiser."